Rossi niederwerka. Ach, witton nicht schulden such oversitten, if his and der weak overweapon. Und siddan wichtiga, dan swa whether hand halig drichten, merdo deme, swa him je met finche.
So as a jazz person, if I were to sit down and play a mode, whether one of the kind of better known Western modes or something like that, I would be exploring it and finding, the kind of interesting central points or, interval relationships, but I would also just be kind of improvising. I from reading some of your things on your website, my understanding is that you're not quite just improvising the melodic material itself, that it's kind of like you talk about modal gestures.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, with these limited number of tones, I don't sing any other tones than you have here, although I might duplicate something at the octave,
right,
or I might go below the slowest tone. I'm not introducing any other tones. So my choices are quite limited, and I'm not consciously trying to make up melodies, to sort of create a tune for Beowulf. I simply have at my disposal these tones, and just as important, I have at my disposal the metrical structure of the text, because it is highly structured and it has a metrical form, which must be respected, not always made audible, but respected. And so I'm in a kind of matrix of time and tone, and choosing tones that will help me to express not only the story and its meaning, but also the metrical structure of the text itself. So I'm functioning on numerous levels simultaneously, and I don't find that what I'm singing is so much melody as it is gesture. Like a gesture can be 3 notes, gesture can be 2 notes. We might today call it minimal music or something like that. It doesn't aim for a long, drawn out composition of a beautiful structured melody. It calls for material in small packages, which can be inverted, changed, turned around, made more interesting in the way it's combined with language. And that's what makes it interesting for the performer, because it's always a challenge how to tell a given text with a given metrical structure, with the given tones of the instrument, and to find ways to make that work so that the story itself and the text itself is in the foreground and not some abstract idea about composition or melody.
So when you're performing Beowulf, you've got this kind of collection of, modal licks, basically. And so given that, how much of that is being improvised in a performance of Beowulf? In other words, you are using this vocabulary, but how much of the way you use it is changing from performance to performance?
It does vary quite a bit in certain places. I think in any given performance, there are moments where there's a fixed song within a song. For instance, there are in the course of Beowulf numerous pieces that seem almost like inserts that were almost dropped in, where you have a story within a story, or you have, for instance, a death lament for somebody who's died, or you have some kind of aside where the singer says to the listeners, "This reminds me of another story. I'll tell you the one about so-and-so," and then you go off on a tangent and tell another story, and then you come back to the main story later. So there are pieces that all fit together in a huge puzzle. Much of it is saying what happened, and then he did this, and then he did that, and then he went there, and then he did that, and he met another man, and he said and then there's a conversation. So that's a separate thing. You have dialogues, you have speeches, like long speeches. Heroes needed to make speeches, and then you have moments when the actual singer of tales stops the action and comments on it from his perspective. How sad this is, or what we have learned about life is this and this and this, and it was like that then, and it's like that now, and we need to take that into account. So it's extremely rich. It's going in and out of focus and shifting back and forth in perspective. If you think of it in terms of cinema, you have wildly different camera angles and lightings and sense of motion, sense of time speeding up, sense of time slowing down, and changes of perspective. It's extremely alive. And the more I work with this text, the more I see how cleverly it was fashioned.
You vary, as you mentioned, not only between speaking and singing, but kind of in between forms of, like, I don't know, melodious, I don't know, Sprechstimme or something.
Yeah.
To use at least that's I think that's the word I learned from learning about Schoenberg when I was
Schoenberg.
The kind of melodious, exaggerated melodious speech. How do you decide, kind of which parts you're going to outright sing versus speak versus, I guess the pacing of the story from the performance I saw, it seems like the pacing of the story and how fast you want to get through certain information does have something to do with that.
Everything's a factor. It's all coming together in the moment of performance to help me make this decision. Sometimes, for instance, in one of those stories within a story, I may have really a set way of performing it with a set accompaniment, and it has a beginning and an end, and it's the same in every performance. And then there are other parts where I have connecting material, let's say, or commentary, where it's really different from performance to performance. It's never the same twice. It will vary only maybe in ways that I would know. I doubt if an outside listener would hear a huge difference. But it's certainly not fixed. And by the way, I should add that I've never used any staff paper and musical notation to fix anything I do. It's nowhere written down. I just have a text. So there are little oral traditions that are born within my own work. And I end up respecting them because they're oral traditions. That's what oral traditions do. And it helps me because I don't then need to be 100% creative 100% of the time. Sometimes I'm recreative. I'm simply, sing us the old song about the death lament for so-and-so. Okay, here it goes. And then it's always going to be the same piece because that's what people want to hear. But in another part of the story, I may do something completely different. I may, for instance, make a so-called mistake, play the wrong note or do the wrong thing, and that may push me into a zone where I'm not comfortable for a little while. And then solving that problem is very interesting for me.
Mm-hmm.
How will I deal with this new situation? That's why it's really, really hard to practice or rehearse this piece, because I've been doing it for many years, and in a way, it happens in performance. I can't sit down and really, I can sort of go over things, but I can't really practice and say, I've got to remember at bar 42, the upbeat to this or that change. I've got to remember to do a crescendo. It's none of this kind of musicianly decision-making going on.